Welcome to It's All Your Fault on True Story FM, the one and only podcast dedicated to helping you with the most challenging human interactions, those involving someone with a high conflict personality. I'm Megan Hunter, and I'm here with my co-host, Bill Eddy.
Hi, everybody.
We are the co-founders of the High Conflict Institute and conflictinfluencer.com, where we focus on training, consulting, coaching, programs, classes, all kinds of things, whether it's for you in your professional life or in your personal life. So today we're going to focus on something that every parent faces when you have children, which is setting limits and following through on those limits, and maybe even setting some or imposing some consequences. So, kids need limits and they can really test us. If you're a parent, you know this. If you're in the workplace or, just about any place in life and you find that it's hard to set limits yourself, it's probably going to be really tricky for you in parenting. So listen in today and we'll all learn together. So Bill, we are so excited about your new book that's coming out here in about a month, called SLIC Solutions for Conflict, Setting Limits and Imposing Consequences in 2.5 steps. So we're going to apply that method to parenting today. First of all, why don't you just give a brief background or introduction, I guess, about the book?
Yeah, so one of the things in dealing with conflict that just keeps coming up for me is that parents, professionals, people in everyday life are really not following the limits that are set by society and each other, and that we really need to strengthen our skills at setting limits and imposing consequences. And one thing I've found, especially true with people that like to violate the limits, is that people often just set the limit, that they don't have a consequence if someone violates it. So you can't talk to me that way. And the person says, well, yes, I can, and I'm just going to keep talking to you that way. And it's like, well, please don't. And what you need is to say, if you keep talking to me that way, I'm going to end this conversation, and we'll talk when you're ready to talk civilly. And you can do that with children, you can do that with employees, you can do that with employers, strangers, etc. And so the idea here is setting limits needs to also have imposing consequences attached to it, either as a threat, so that people know if you violate my limits, this is what's going to happen, or imposing the consequence. And so in many situations, those two steps really do need to go together. But there's a half step that people wonder about, and that's giving the person a statement that shows empathy, attention, and respect, an ear statement. And about half the time, you want to give an ear statement to motivate change and to let people know our relationship's secure. This behavior just has to change. And so that's the 2.5 steps. So what I found and others found, and you know certainly, is that we're used to just saying stop, and we're not used to attaching the consequence and a statement that shows empathy, attention, and respect. So that's the idea behind the method and the need for it today. Everyone needs to learn how to do this because a lot of limits just aren't respected in society today. And we need to train children how to deal with society and the fact that there are rules. And of course, we deal a lot with family law and divorce where the rules seem to go out the window and children don't know what's okay. So that's why we want to talk about children.
Okay, well, let's start with, the little ones. I remember my mom saying to me when I was a young parent, and I was pulling my hair out with
Uh-huh.
toddlers and things. And And, she and others would say, oh, you think they're hard now, just wait till they're teenagers. All right. So I guess the toddler years are the training ground for the mid years and then the teen years, but probably setting us up for life, hopefully, and setting our children up in a good way. I know I failed on that a lot. There was a lot of what you said, limit setting, but without the consequence, or there would be the threat of a consequence, but no follow through.
Right.
Yeah, which is just not good. So I was thinking while you're talking about just yesterday, I was at a funeral service and it was for an older gentleman, and he was just the sweetest, nicest, kindest man. And his grandchildren stepped up to the microphone during the service and talked about how, you know, if they were doing something they shouldn't, they didn't even have to get a reprimand from him. It was just the look.
Hmm.
It was that they didn't want to disappoint grandpa. And I thought, wouldn't it be so nice if we could all just get a look and problem solved? But as we know, it's not the case. So let's say, for some parents, it's they have it in the bag. They know how to set limits. They know how to impose consequences. For others, maybe with a more challenging child, toddler, 4-year-old, 3-year-old, um, who throws fits, or let's say this is a child who sort of intentionally hurts a sibling, and maybe when mom and dad aren't looking, pushes the sibling or does something kind of naughty. How do you set a limit or impose a consequence on that?
Well, let me first say my background, my perspective comes from several places. One's being a child and family therapist for a dozen years, also being a kindergarten teacher for 4 years, so I got the 5-year-olds. Also being
That
the
helps.
yeah, also being director of a child development center for a university, starting basically with 2.5-year-olds going up to 6. That was Seattle University. I lived in Seattle for 3 years, and that was a lot of fun. So I've worked with this age group a lot, and what's interesting is so much of it is about really redirecting behavior. And often parents think of, being rigid. If I'm firm enough with my limit, they'll of course follow it, which of course they won't because they're having a hard time controlling their bodies. And what's interesting, 2, 3, 4-year-olds, is their ability to manage their muscles is just kind of coming online. And so they don't know what to do with this, but what gets their attention is the consequence. And consequences don't have to all be negative. That's one of the things we talk about in the book is that consequences can be positive. So, Johnny, you need to put down that block. It's not okay to hit your sister with the block. We build things with the blocks. So let's look at what you can build here. And so you may be, with a 2-year-old, just redirecting their energy because they're still learning self-control, and so punishment or timeout may be really not what they need at that age. Then 3, and here's an interesting fact that I didn't know for years and years. Do you know the most violent age in the human lifespan?
Is age.
3.
Wow.
It's age 3 because the child has all this energy, these muscles that are coming online, all this can do stuff, and their body doesn't yet know you can't do some of what you feel like doing. And so when you think about it, 3-year-olds are punching, throwing, hitting, doing all these things. And that means that's the age where they need to start learning that it's not okay to do those things. So your scenario, let's say, 3-year-olds hitting their 2-year-old sister with a block, um, needs to be needs to do a couple things. One is be redirected. Let's build a bridge or let's build a wall. And that's what we do with blocks. We don't hit our sister with blocks. So you need to give the message of what to do and what not to do. And that's often helpful is don't just say don't do this. give them something to do. So you're redirecting them. But this is also a situation where it really helps to give them an ear statement, some empathy, attention, respect. I know you're upset, Johnny. And so we use words. We're going to use words and we're going to build a wall here. We're not going to hit our sister with the block. So it's redirecting, but also the consequence may come if that behavior is repeated, where you have a little bit of timeout. Some people have a timeout chair, cushion, rug, whatever it is. But nothing that's severe. Some people say you're going to have time out for 10 minutes. Well, a 3-year-old can't do that for 10 minutes. I like the idea where time out is no longer than the child's age. But get them thinking, because you want to start thinking. We use words when we're angry. And I see you're angry, Johnny, and I can understand that. But we use words.
But do consequences work for everyone? Because we hear so many different, uh, I guess, parenting styles. We see, like loads of advice for different types of children, right? There's ADHD and ADD and ODD and, just all of these different autism spectrum and different behaviors. So I think parents and teachers are faced with so many challenges now that maybe they weren't in the past. And, I grew up with, and I think you probably grew up with consequences, and all
Yep.
kids needed consequences. And I still believe all kids need consequences, but I've heard some people say consequences don't work on every child.
Well, I believe that it's what is the consequence, because consequences do work on all humans, all children. I mean, you can stop somebody from doing something by putting them in a room where they can't do it. I worked in a psychiatric hospital for 3 years where we had basically a padded wall room where you had a big timeout and you go in that room and you can punch the walls, scream, do whatever you want, but you're not going to hurt the other kids.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a question of what are the consequences. And with kids, it needs to also be positive as well as negative. And one of the things I learned with kids in mental health treatment in psych hospitals and some schools, is starting about 5, is you do star charts. And it's like when they have good behavior, they get a star. When they do good behavior 5 times, then they get something, a toy or a M&M or something that goes with getting enough stars. And that kind of system, surprisingly, was used and I think is being used in some prisons with young adults who are actually motivated by earning cigarettes or earning free time or earning something. And
Right.
what they've found that the very structured kind of behavior and positive consequence as well as negative consequences um, work, especially with young adults who have behavior problems that got them into prison. So I think it isn't a question that consequences don't work, it's finding the right consequences. And one of the things that we put in the book is 5 questions to ask yourself in imposing consequences. And the first one is this consequence proportional to the limit that I set? So let's say a parent says to a teen, "You're coming, you've been coming in late after curfew on the weekend, so I'm going to take your cell phone away for 24 hours." And that may be a realistic, proportional thing. But the parent gets angry and the child says, "How dare you set limits? I'm going to come home whenever I want to, and you're really stupid, blankety blank blank parent. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what everybody else knows these days." And you go, "Well, if you're going to talk to me that way, I'm going to take your phone away for a week." "Well, I can talk to you even worse. I can call you blah, 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 or I'm taking your phone away for a month." That's not proportional. It's not going to work. You're going to be
You're going to be
you're going to
punished.
be you're going to be punished as the parent. And so that's why proportion really matters. And that's where kids learn. 24 hours, a teen can learn, okay, I really need to be home on curfew. But a month, there's no learning. There's just all resentment and sabotage and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
I've made that mistake as a parent, for
I think
sure.
all parents do. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We just keep amping that up, and it doesn't work. I'll tell you now. So yeah, so you mentioned the five questions from the book. Is the consequence proportional to the limit that I've set? Have I considered positive consequences as well as negative
And,
consequences with,
and
you
that's
know,
especially important with kids, is don't make it
yeah.
all negative.
Otherwise, they start feeling, I think, a little downtrodden and discouraged.
Yeah.
And number three, is the consequence safe?
Right.
Um,
And safe for the person setting the consequence and also safe for the person that's suffering the consequence. So you got to think that through so you don't, punish a child like locking them in their room or, strapping them to the bed or something. I mean, this is terrible. I only mention these because in extreme situations, some people have done this and it's not the way to go. But people didn't know what else to do.
yeah, yeah. Parents can really get to to their wits' end, that's for sure. Number four, am I ready to enforce my consequences? And yeah,
I was just going to say, and this one is so important because in today's world, parents feel like they can't impose consequences. They feel like, well, the other kids get away with this. And of course, their kids will point that out. Well, you're the only parent in this neighborhood that cares about such and such. And so, it's so unfair that and so are you ready to stand with your limit and impose your consequence even when they guilt trip you that, you're so unfair.
right, right. And sometimes as parents, it's just humans, we forget that what consequence we imposed or what threatened to impose, right? And then we have to
Yeah,
remember it. So maybe write it down so you don't forget.
right.
Get some support from someone else. And then number five, do I need to get help in imposing my consequence? And sometimes you do. So, perhaps meeting with the teacher and
Right.
talking that through with the teacher. Now, if we move into the schools situation, into that environment, teachers are busy with a lot of students. So what if they have one student who's, constantly misbehaving because they're bored or for whatever reason, and the teacher doesn't have, enough time to, kind of give special attention to this child, and the child keeps getting these notes, sent home every week. Let's say like a kindergartner or first grader, what's a parent to do? I think parents feel pretty trapped and stuck because they don't know, is it the wrong teacher student scenario? Is my, should the teacher be doing more? Is my child impossible?
Yeah. Well, I think this is where it's so important for parents and teachers to work together. And having been a teacher and not actually having been a parent, but a counselor to like hundreds of parents, I think this is so important. And our culture likes to divide people and have parents see teachers as being mean to their kids, or teachers see parents as too loose and permissive and stuff like that. But parents and teachers need to support each other and get together. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, if I had any difficulty at school, my parents 100% supported the school. It's
Yep.
like, you know, your teacher said you're in trouble for doing this, Billy, and we totally support the teacher, so you're going to also have some restriction at home because you got in trouble at school. And that kind of thing is where children learn pretty quick. But if it's divided, if the parents undermine the teacher or the teacher undermines the parents, then it's not going to work. So I would say getting together and talking about what can we do here. And we have an example in the book. It's I think it's a 16-year-old boy who's into gaming after school and doesn't do any of his homework, and his grades are going down, and mom and teacher get together about this and what should be done. And so mom has some consequence. She unplugs the Wi-Fi, uh, bef- when she leaves for work. And anyway, so he can't do the gaming online and do his homework when she gets home from work, because he gets home before she does. Then he's done some of his homework. So that was a case in that scenario where mom says, you've got to do homework first and then gaming, because he doesn't get to the homework. And if you don't, then I'm going to unplug the Wi-Fi and you won't have access to it until I get home. So he pushed the limit, and he, self-control, got distracted, got excited about the gaming, and forgot about the rule. And so mom had to impose the rule, and then he started doing better. But then another issue is he's using AI for his homework, and that's a big issue with teachers today. You're not learning if you're using AI. And so that was another thing that was going to have a consequence. Parent and teacher work together on that. So if the teachers told the mom that the grades continue to go down, there's a problem with this, then mom would impose more consequences. But because Johnny, or whatever his name was, learned that mom meant business with unplugging the Wi-Fi, is he cooperated with what she wanted. So that's part of it, is learning that the parent's going to follow through. Follow through is so important with kids and adults too.
It is. So that begs the question, why don't we follow through? I mean, underneath it, it's fear, right? Especially as kids get older, let's say teenagers. Even in an intact household where the parents are still married, or let's say a single parent household where the other parent isn't involved and the child's always been raised by this one parent, um, there can be a great deal of fear that our child's going to reject us, is going to
Mm-hmm.
run away, is going to go online and meet someone. I mean, there's a lot of fear that drives this, and for good reason these days. How can a parent overcome that fear of setting a limit? And we'll talk about the divorce scenario next and co-parenting, but even in an intact household, how do you overcome that?
Yeah, I think it's parents supporting each other, and also who your children are around. So if parents have kind of a community of activities, so you have the school, you have some activities, sports that the child may be involved in, um, music activities. Do you do them at home, or do you do them at some stranger's house, and saying, you've got to do this in our house. You can get together with your friends, but you need to do it at our house. Those kinds of things, is got to be a sense of support. And that's like the question number 5: do I need help with this? That parents need to support each other, teachers support each other to set limits in today's world. And one of the big, really positive thing that's been happening, I think, is a lot of high schools now take the cell phones away at the beginning of the day, put them in a pouch in a special place, and then the kids pick them up at the end of the day. And that's a place where there's really a unified effort to set limits, and that it's working, because all the kids can't have their cell phone all day. And kids are saying that they appreciate it because they don't have the willpower yet to deny themselves, oh, I got to look here.
Yeah, most of us don't, even at our
Yes,
advanced
adults
ages,
too.
right? Yeah, so I think it's tricky, right, as a parent, because we know what's out there in the world, and we don't want our kids to leave our homes and you know be exposed to things that we then have zero control over. So we kind of weigh things out, and we go, okay, well, I guess I can lessen the limit, reduce the limits, and not impose consequences in order to keep my child in my home instead of running, sneaking out at night, or going towards drugs or something. And I think that drives so much of this. And unfortunately, then you kind of things get out of balance. It's
Yeah.
hard.
Well, I think it's you got to start early. And that's why, it's interesting when I ran the Child Development Center for Seattle University that we had occasionally we'd have kids with difficulties at 3, 4, and 5. And typically they had parents who either were super permissive or overwhelmed. And I remember one woman, single mother, had a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, and 5-year-old, and she was overwhelmed. She was working full time. She'd come drop the kids off in the morning, and helping set limits and helping her set limits and support our limits and us supporting her was so important. So you really have to start at 3, I think, that you can't let kids get away with stuff. When they're 5 years old, they're punching the other kids, they're throwing things, they're swearing at the teachers. You can't have that. You got to start teaching that at 3, right when they're learning how far can I go. And
Yeah.
I've seen parents laugh at their kids breaking all kinds of rules because it's cute and it's funny. That doesn't help. You need to start being consistent. So by the time that they're 12 and 13, they're so used to knowing what the rules are and how to follow them that when they break the rules, they're breaking tiny rules and they're not going to devastate their future and they're not going to run away from home and get in trouble with the police. So all kids are going to break some rules, but you want them used to big rules that you don't break and also good communication with them. If there's a problem, let's talk about it.
So all well and good for those with a 3-year-old. Now let's shift to the 16-year-old, who is, has been uh, in, let's say, psychiatric hospitals a couple of times. Lots of bad behavior, lots of suicide threats. So you have now this whole extra layer, which, is a reality for a lot of parents. The child might be sneaking out at night, maybe running away, is talking to, much older people online,
Yeah.
getting involved in lots of things. And so you have that weighing on you. And now let's add into it, it's a divorce situation and there's co-parents. And then new step parents involved as well. And misbehaviors start happening with the 16-year-old at one household behaving okay and the other household stealing money, stealing things. And then when the 16-year-old gets in trouble for it and gets caught, is then threatening suicide. Now you have parents who feel like their hands are tied because they don't want to, do anything that's going to put this child over the edge and do the unimaginable and the worst thing. And now it'll be, it's terrible, right? So setting limits in those circumstances, what do we do?
I think again, you've got to work together. And I know from doing a lot of divorce mediation that getting parents together with their new co-parent, with their new mate, after divorce has sometimes been very important and effective so that you've got a child like that. The parents need to be on the same page about child behavior. They don't have to have exactly the same rules, but the message has to be at dad's house and with your new stepmom, you have to follow their rules. And at mom's house and new stepdad, you have to follow their rules. That we're going to support, even if their rules are more strict than ours or looser than ours, we're still going to support them. You can't come and get us to help you violate the other parent's rules. So you really need to collaborate on that. And what we've seen, and it's sad, I've had cases now as a consultant where there's kids 11 and 12 who are suicidal. And it's because the parents are in so much conflict. It's always the parents are not on the same page. They're so opposed to each other and trying to get advantages by being, let's say, the loose, happy, fun parent versus the boring, responsible parent.
Right.
um, and that you've got to get people on the same page because you're dividing a child against themselves. And that's one of the real tragedies today. When you get really young kids reporting that, it's always because parents are in a really high conflict situation.
Yeah. So how do you get that other parent on the same page? I mean, you know, better than anyone, someone with a high conflict personality isn't going to want to be on the same page to help this child. And so, let's say you have, you know, a dad and a new wife, right? The stepmom, and they're doing everything they can, but not getting support from the other household, even though asking for it, and you know, doing everything they can, whether it's through individual conversations or even through the court or through a parenting coordinator, but they just can't get that. So then in that situation, what's a parent to do? You just keep setting the limits and imposing the consequences and just do your best.
Well, I think, see, this is where the family court plays a role, and family court judges. And I know as a mediator, I always say try to mediate your case, and that's better than court in general. But some cases need a grown up in the room,
Yeah.
and that's often the judge. And what the judge can say is, we're going to change the parenting schedule, and if you don't do this and this and this, then you're going to have less parenting time. What's interesting, we have an example in the book of a judge telling a dad in this case, you know, you're getting your daughter to school late, you've got to correct that, or I'm going to have to take away some of your weekday overnights because you're just, you know, your child's not learning responsibility, follow the rules, and they're standing out at school. They're missing like every other day they're coming into the building late. And then next hearing, there's an accumulation of lates. And the judge says, Dad, what's going on? And Dad says, well, I get there. I'm in the lot on time, and I'm teaching my daughter her times tables and some of her words and this and that. So we're working on schoolwork together. But when she goes in, yeah, usually the school's already started. But, you know, I'll try to do better, Your Honor. And Your Honor says, I said to you like 3 months ago, try to do better. And here you are again with this problem. So I'm going to change the schedule. You're going to mostly have the weekend time, but weekday nights just seem like they're not something you're able to handle. And I gave you a chance to find out, and you've demonstrated that you can't change. So I'm helping things change. So that kind of thing a judge can help with. Now, we see sometimes more and more actually where a child's resisting contact with one of the parents and they may be doing something poorly and the schedule needs to change, or the other parent may be bad mouthing that parent and interfering with their contact, and so that needs to change. So courts can change the schedule, and sometimes that's the consequence in these high conflict divorce cases.
Yeah, no easy solutions, but I think parents need to, you know, just continue to set limits, impose consequences, use ear half the time, and you know, just keep moving on. So, well, good, Bill. I know we've talked about parenting in the past, but I think it's so important, and
Yeah,
just really driving home that message that this has to be instilled early on when kids are
right.
3 years old, and so they learn it for life. Most important thing of all. So thank you, Bill. And I think it's just such an appropriate topic for you to talk about as a former kindergarten teacher. And for me, having been the mom of three little ones, I
you
had a fair
you
bit of
had
experience
you
in,
had the
you know,
hands-on experience there.
hands-on,
Yep.
failing and succeeding a little bit here and there. So learning lessons all along the way. But well, we're going to wrap this one up, and we'll put links in the show notes to the new book, and it's called SLIC Solutions for Conflict, which you can get on Amazon. You can get it anywhere books are sold. We're doing pre-orders right now, which is really, really important in the book world, pre-sales. So get it now. It'll also be available as an ebook soon, so be watching for that. And we are grateful that you are listening to our podcast, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. If you're looking for training or consultation, coaching, online courses, anything like that, we are here when it comes to high conflict. So visit us at highconflictinstitute.com or conflictinfluencer.com, regardless of whether you want this in your professional life or personal life. So until we see you next time, keep practicing and keep learning. Be kind to yourself and to others while we try to keep the conflict small and find the missing piece.